Today is a very interesting anniversary in the life of our nation. 10 years ago to this very day, a tweet was sent out by the Associated Press that informed the world that there had been two explosions at the White House and that then President Barack Obama had been seriously injured. As you might imagine, this sort of news was incredibly shocking for so many different people as we tried to get our heads wrapped around the idea that some sort of an attack could have taken place in the home of the most powerful man in the nation. We couldn't wrap our minds around this sort of thing, and this news actually had some widespread ideas that wound up affecting even the New York Stock Exchange. On that particular day, the Dow dropped 150 points, and the stock exchange as a whole seemed to have lost an estimated $130 billion. That's a lot of money. There was just one problem. It wasn't real. See, not too long after this, the Associated Press also sent out a second tweet saying that they'd been the victim of a hack. That somebody had tweeted out a false report on what was going on at the White House. President Barack Obama was just fine, nothing had happened, and within just a couple of hours, everything seemed to settle back down and go back to normal. The Dow improved, the market as itself kind of leveled off. It was still a little down that day, but what are you going to do? And yet, in just the course of a couple of hours, a rumor had created all kinds of widespread panic throughout our nation and had threatened to disrupt everything going on in our world. This sort of thing isn't exactly new, that a rumor might cause this kind of problems and kind of issues in a nation. In fact, throughout history, there are several times where rumors that seem to come out of absolutely nowhere create all kinds of chaos for different nations or cities or people in general. In the late 1990s, there was a rumor going around in a village in Indonesia that they believed several members of their populations were sorcerers, citing things like family members getting sick seemingly out of nowhere or crops not producing the way that they should. The Indonesian police believed these rumors to be so widespread that they thought they needed to do something to keep these supposed sorcerers safe. So they began rounding up as many of them as they possibly could in an effort to try to transport them to a safe location where they wouldn't be harmed by the villagers. However, the villagers saw these supposed sorcerers being taken away by police and believed it to be confirmation of the idea that they were actually sorcerers. And so the villagers stormed the police station and murdered dozens of these alleged sorcerers. As evidence would later point out, there was no basis to this rumor whatsoever. These villagers had acted in a panic over something that did not actually exist. We can go even further. Shortly after the Canadians entered World War I, they did so about 3 years before the United States did, in case you've forgotten your U.S. history. Thank you, Mr. Keck. Canadians entered the World War I, and they seemed to be this widespread rumor that was taking place that different German Americans who were still sympathetic to the fatherland were going to invade Canada. In fact, there was a belief from one particular, I believe he was a British consulate, I'm not 100% sure of that, so don't quote me on that particular idea, but he spread the idea that something around 80,000 well-trained and well-armed Germans who had been drilling in the Niagara part of New York State were ready to launch an attack on Canadian soil. It was so bad that the Canadian Prime Minister at that particular time spent millions of dollars on an investigation only to find out it's just something somebody said to somebody else. And it spread like wildfire, causing a panic in an entire country. All throughout the Middle Ages, there were widespread rumors throughout all of Europe that a group of Jewish people were going around poisoning the wells of various towns, the source of their drinking water, causing widespread devastation. Those rumors were escalated as the Black Plague began its movement all throughout Europe. This sort of thing created all kinds of problems for them. There was a belief that somehow Satan was protecting these Jewish folks so long as they poisoned the well of Christians. The rumors spread to such an extent that people began to kill Jewish folks over and over again. In fact, in 1 year, the town of Guinea, France, reported something like 5,000 Jews were killed by being burned alive. That's just one town in 1 year. There were reports all over the place of other Jews being killed or banished from town, all because of a rumor that had no basis in reality whatsoever. The ideas of rumors and gossip, they're not exactly something that's new to humanity. In fact, I tend to believe that as long as there were more than two people walking the face of the planet, there was probably gossip happening about somebody else. Rumors being spread about what that person might be doing when you don't see them. Gossip about, well, he said something funny to me the other day, and I don't know where that came from. It's been an issue going on in the world since there have been human beings. And this sort of thing has, throughout the course of human history, has not gone away. In fact, rumors and gossip has been industrialized. There are scores of different businesses that exist for the sole purpose of making up stories. You see them in the grocery market. I used to see them all the time as a kid, Elvis is still alive and he's hanging out in Jersey. This woman claimed to have an alien baby. Bigfoot is my husband. But even still, there are still industries that exist that spread rumors and gossip about celebrities or people in positions of power. They exist for the sole purpose of spreading things that may or may not be true. And yet, I'm willing to bet that if we took an informal survey just here today, and I asked you all to raise your hand, I'm not going to, so don't worry about it, I'm not putting you on the spot yet. If we were to take an informal survey, probably everybody in this room would all agree that gossip and rumors and slanderous talk is wrong. We know it's something that we shouldn't do. We know it's something that we shouldn't participate in. We know it's something that can cause devastation to people and lives. Many of us in this room have likely been affected by somebody else gossiping about us or spreading rumors about us. We've been hurt by that. We know how much it can affect our personal relationships with those around us, and yet there's something about hearing the words, "Well, I heard," that kind of perk our ears up, that get us interested. There's still something about us in our human nature that we want to hear about that sort of thing. We want to know what other people might know. We want to speculate on what may be going on behind closed doors. We want to know what people are really like when we don't see them. It still appeals to us. There's something about us that just wants to know these things. And whenever the story, whether it's true or not, is told to us, our first instinct is to tell somebody else, to spread that news, to lean into our friend's ear and say, "Well, I heard." But a lot of the time, the source of various gossip and rumors, it can completely come out of nowhere with absolutely no basis whatsoever in reality or truth. It can create all kinds of issues and problems, not just for us, but for other people. It can create all kinds of conflicts going on, not just amongst individual people, but all throughout the world itself. And you can't really put that genie back in the bottle once it's out. Take, for instance, our text today. We're going to find ourselves in 2 Samuel chapter 10. I know, for once we're not going to the book of Acts. How about that? That's crazy. 2 Samuel chapter 10 is where we're going to find ourselves. While you're turning there, either on your Bible app or on your Bible itself, let me give you a little bit of background to kind of get you caught up into what's going on here. David has recently been made the king of Israel following the death of Saul. And as we may remember, Saul created a lot of issues for David before he was ever made king. He hunted him down relentlessly, seemingly for no good reason whatsoever, other than the idea that God had decided to make David king one day instead of Saul's family. David had been made this king after the death of Saul. There had been kind of a turbulent time in the nation of Israel, and yet in short order, David was able to create security and safety for his nation. And already in the midst of this time period, David has done some incredible things. David has brought the Ark of the Covenant back to the nation of Israel, although that did create some issues for Uzzah. I invite you to go ahead and read that sometime. Not right now, please. He'd also gone ahead and defeated the Philistines, the greatest enemies that the Israelites had at that time. His military mind was so smart and so sharp that he was able to get rid of the greatest enemy the Israelites had at that particular time. And even amongst his interpersonal relationships, David had been able to do some incredible stuff because David was able to show kindness to his friend Jonathan, who, even though Jonathan had passed away, David still wanted to find some way to show his friend that he cared about him. So he showed kindness to Jonathan's son Mephibosheth, which is spelled exactly the way it sounds if you're taking notes. David has already done some incredible things in the midst of this, and while things in Israel are starting to look up for the first time in quite a long time, things are kind of looking a little bleak for their neighbors to the east. See, David has learned that the king of the Ammonites has recently passed away, and that his son has been made king in his father's place. So when we get to our text today, David decides that he wants to do something to try to show his respect, to try to show that he cares about what's going on in the nation of the Ammonites. He wants to show respect and compassion for the new king and his now deceased father. The first part of 2 Samuel chapter 10, verse 2 says, "Then David said, I will show kindness to Hanan, the son of Nahash, just as his father showed kindness to me." So David sent his emissaries to console Hanan concerning his father. This is such a classy move for David, in my opinion. David has heard about the death of this king, and he wants to go and show a little kindness to his neighbors to the east. And he does so not necessarily just because he's just that great a guy, but also because he references the idea that Nahash had done something kind for David. And I did some digging and stuff, and I couldn't find any particular passage that referenced what it is that Nahash might have done. But I did find that most biblical scholars believe that while David was fleeing from Saul, that at some point in time he went into the nation of the Ammonites, and that Nahash had given him security and given him just a chance to catch his breath. Saul was relentless in his pursuit of David, and he went all over the map trying to get this. David was completely reliant on people to help keep him safe, to help keep him alive, because Saul was crazier than a bag of cats. And if Saul had the opportunity, Saul was going to kill David where he stood. And Nahash had been one of those nations that was kind enough to give David just a few moments to catch his breath, to be safe from what Saul was doing to him. And now that Nahash has passed on, David, as a show of respect, wants to show the same kindness that Nahash had shown him to Hanan, Nahash's son. But David's a king. He can't just drop everything and go. Instead, he sends emissaries in his place, people who are specifically trained to go and bring counseling and to speak with Hanan and to kind of just walk him through the grieving process. He does this simply because he respects him and he cares about what's going on. Even though David is trying to show some simple kindness, nothing can ever be that simple, can it? Nothing that is a symbol of respect and love and compassion can ever be just that, right? Nah, instead, Hanan's ambassadors and advisors and leaders get it in their heads that this must be something deeper, something even more sinister. In verse 3, they present what they believe is the true motivation behind these emissaries' arrival. We read, "The Ammonite leaders said to Hanan, their lord, just because David has sent men with condolences for you, do you really believe he's showing respect for your father? Instead, hasn't David sent emissaries in order to scout out the city, to spy on it, and demolish it?" Where did that come from? At what point in time does this notion of a handful of emissaries going to go and show their respect to Hanan somehow get transferred into, they're here to kill us? We're all going to die. This is nuts, right? Like, they just seem to conjure this up seemingly out of absolutely nowhere. At no point in time in David's life has his character ever reflected that he might be capable of doing something like this. Remember, he spent some time living among the Ammonites. It's likely that some people know who David is. And yet these guys are ready to believe the worst of him right away, with absolutely no evidence whatsoever. David has sent his emissaries to bring condolences. Well, I heard they began a rumor. And what's worse is that this rumor was actually believed. See, Hanan himself actually believed that this was the case. He actually goes so far as to say that he knows that this is what's going on. And in fact, Hanan doesn't want to just kill these emissaries. No, he wants to take it a step further. Hanan has decided that these emissaries sent by David simply as a show of respect, these emissaries that are sent with the sole purpose of bringing him condolences over the loss of his dad, Hanan decides he wants to humiliate them. We read about it in verse 4. It says, "So Hanan took David's emissaries, shaved off half their beards, cut their clothes in half at the hips, and sent them away." Hanan ordered these men, sent here to show kindness and respect, he ordered that half of their clothes be cut off at the waist, exposing them in a humiliating way. And if that wasn't enough, he ordered that they have half their beard shaved. That is an absolute indignity. The beard, in this day and age, and throughout history, is a sign of respectability and maturity. Okay, I'm going to admit to you, as a bearded man in the culture and context that I currently live in, I understand this sounds a little ridiculous to us, does it not? It's a beard. It's hair that grows on my face. Literally every man in this room can do that, and in fact, I believe should. However, in this culture and in this context and in this region of the world, the beard was a little bit more than just that. The beard was not simply something that grew on their face. It was, in fact, the most cherished of ornaments a man could have. It was 100% something that they absolutely loved to have. The possessor of a beard would consider it to be his finest part of his face, as anybody with a beard really does, still even to this day. It's my greatest characteristic. I know it. It's fine. I'm starting to get some white hairs in it, and I love it because it makes me look more distinguished. Now you'll have to respect me more. No, I'm just kidding. In fact, in some cases, men would actually swear to their beard. They would make pledges on their beard. Things like, if I'm being dishonest with you, may my beard fall off. Or if I fail you, you may shave my beard. Because understand, at this particular point in time, the only time a man would ever be clean shaven was for one of two reasons. Either one, he was in mourning. Somebody important in his life has passed away, and he's lost that person. And as a sign of his just utter sorrow, he would shave his beard completely off. The only other reason a man would ever be clean shaven was a symbol to show that he was somebody else's slave. But Hanan does not go so far as to shave the entire beard. No, he just shaves half of it, making these men who were there to show their respect, there to show kindness to him, making them utterly ridiculous, the objects of ridicule and humiliation. It was bad enough to cut their clothes off at the half and make them parade around town like that. But now he's just making them downright look foolish. This is such a big deal, actually, to these emissaries that they don't feel they can actually come and return and present themselves to David. Instead, they send word to David. They send a messenger to go along to their king and to share with him what happened. And David, again, being the classy fellow that he is, he tells these guys, well, just wait in Jericho until your beards grow back. Again, I know it sounds ridiculous in our culture, our context, but their beards were a part of their respectability as men. And rather than have them come back home and have their friends and their family see them in this state, David gives them the opportunity to just stay in this town until things can kind of get back to normal, and then they can return home. So they don't have to face the humiliation that Hanan and his men tried to put on him. This is an indignity that he has caused on this, and David's just frankly a little more than annoyed at the Ammonites for it. When Hanan realizes that maybe he had gone a little too far here, he reacts in a way that he knows he's got to do. He understands he may have just brought trouble upon his kingdom, all because he chose to believe something that these men just made up. He chose to believe a rumor and gossip about what these guys were really here to do, and now he's about to bring all kinds of problems on them. And so Hanan, as a way to kind of prepare himself for it, gets ready for this sort of thing. And we see it in verse 6. It says, when the Ammonites realized that they had become repulsive to David, They hired 20,000 foot soldiers from the Armenians of Bethrob and Zoab, 1,000 men from the king of Maacah, and 12,000 men from Tob. Hanan realizes that he's about to face war. That by buying into the rumor and the gossip that these men have spread, he's about to bring all kinds of trouble upon his nation. And he knows that they may not be able to stand up. See, because at this time, the Israelites' reputation as a military superpower is on the rise. For most of their history, the Israelites have always been presented as somebody to be feared, somebody not to be messed with, and a group not to be trifled with. But under Saul, they had begun to see some defeats take place. In fact, Saul himself died in battle. When the king fell in battle, it was a sign of weakness, but David already has begun to build up their reputation again. And Hanan is so worried about what the Israelites might do that he turns to his allies. He turns to this nation of the Amorites that have been a part of their group for a long time, and he just says, hey, can I hire some of your dudes? We're about to go into battle. I need your best men. Can you spare them? I'll give you money. He's panicked because he knows what's about to happen. He knows this thunder that's about to rain down on him. So they're getting ready for this sort of thing. They're about to face potential war based on a rumor, and he needs to be prepared. But as you may have guessed, it doesn't really go well for them at all. Things become real bad real fast for them. Again, the reputation of the Israelites is beginning to grow. And when the Arameans, there we go, there's a lot of A words in the midst of this story, so I've tried to keep it straight in my head, but it gets a little jumbled. Sorry, I'm a human being. Anyway, the Arameans that Hanan paid off to be a part of this, he places them on the front line, which I think is kind of a really just mean move to do, right? We're hiring you out, we're going to put you up front. So that way the important people don't die. I mean, we don't die. The Arameans see Joab, the captain of David's army, bringing along with him the elite troops, coming their way right towards them, ready for battle. And this fight between the Israelites and the Arameans and the Ammonites, well, it doesn't exactly last too long. We see what kind of happens in verse 13. It says, Joab and his troops advanced to fight the Arameans, and they fled before him. They ran away. These great soldiers that Hanan has paid off a lot of money, they see the Israelites coming towards them, and suddenly they decide the paycheck's not big enough. And they turn tail and run. And again, in verse 14, it kind of continues on. When the Ammonites saw that the Arameans had fled, they too fled before Abishai and entered the city. So Joab withdrew from the attack against the Ammonites and went to Jerusalem. This has got to be one of the most ridiculous fights in wartime history, right? All the Israelites seemed to do was just show up and flex. And they were like, no thank you, we're going to go home now. Really shows a lot of what the Arameans and the Ammonites are like, right? Bunch of wimps. One of my favorite things as a guy who's 6'5" to do is to just kind of come up behind somebody when they're not paying attention and just stand there. I don't do anything. I just stand there until they realize there's a giant presence behind them. And then when they slightly turn, I love it. I don't know why. I probably need to pray about it. It's just fun for me. That's essentially what happens here is the Arameans and the Ammonites, they see the Israelites, they're like, nope, and they run away. That's crazy. But it doesn't stop there because David has decided this humiliation is still too much and somebody's going to have to pay for this. And so David actually comes and he joins the fight in what would be round 2 if you want to consider the first part a fight at all. He shows up and verse 18 tells us, but the Arameans fled before Israel. David killed 700 of their charioteers and 40,000 foot soldiers. He also struck down Shobach, commander of their army, who died there. I'm going to remind you again, because I don't want you to miss this. All these problems, all this bloodshed, all of these deaths, were 100% avoidable. Because this entire battle has been built on a rumor. One guy saw these emissaries of David coming and said, I heard, and it snowballed beyond there. One guy conjured it up in his mind that this act of kindness had to have something more sinister behind it, told the guy next to him, and now thousands of men are dead. I don't think that's what they intended to happen when they started this rumor. I don't think that they ever thought that this was a possibility if they shared what they thought was on their mind. I don't think that by spreading this particular brand of gossip was something that they ever thought was going to happen. But it did. Because that's the way that rumors tend to work. And in fact, it was going to have even greater effect on the Ammonites. In verse 19, the end of it says, after this, the Arameans were afraid to ever help the Ammonites again. The Ammonites lost an ally. Understand that in this particular time period, if somebody wants to come do war with you, the first thing you do is you call up your buddies. Right? Same thing when we were in playground as kids. I heard this guy wants to fight me. Will you come fight with me? Before long, we're all just standing there talking trash. I got in one fight in school, just one. That's all I needed. I took care of it. But that's what they do. And now, the Arameans are telling the Ammonites, hey, the next time you got somebody who wants to start some trouble with you, don't call us. They are now at a weaker position. Thousands of men have died, and now politically, this nation is in jeopardy. They created problems for themselves because they believed a rumor, because they spread gossip. Folks, we all know the destructive power that spreading rumors and gossip brings. And sure, probably in our context, a lot of the gossip and rumors that we might hear probably aren't going to lead to war, but it'll still cause harm. It'll still cause damage. It's something that we all know. It's something that many of us in here have likely experienced, that we've been on the receiving end of. The pain and the hurt that comes in finding out somebody that you trusted couldn't be trusted, or that somebody who didn't really know what was going on made up a story about you. And you developed a reputation through no actions of yourself. We know rumors and gossip are wrong. So why do we still participate in them? Why do we still feel the need to be actively involved in these stories being spread? Why is it that when we hear the words, well, I heard, we give our total and complete and undivided attention to it? We try to justify this sort of behavior. Well, I'm just taking an interest. I want to make sure that they're okay, or I want to make sure that they're not doing fill in the blank. In the church, even, we try to sanctify it. We try to say, well, folks, I think we need to pray for so-and-so because this is what's going on. Or I heard that this is what's happening in their lives. Rumors and gossip do nothing but cause pain. They cause destruction. They cause all kinds of problems. It destroyed this country politically. It killed thousands of their men needlessly. And in our culture, in our context, it's going to create all kinds of destruction and devastation amongst us. We may not think that we're causing any harm by sharing the latest juicy gossip or hearing whatever the rumor is that's going on and starting off a sentence, well, I heard. But when we participate in that, when we're actively involved in rumors and gossip, we are opening up the door for our unity as the church to be destroyed and for the church to suffer harm. You may not think that by spreading a rumor or passing along some gossip that you're doing any harm, but let me tell you this, there's not a single raindrop that blames itself for the flood, but it's still an active participant in it. Rumors and gossip can destroy church unity so fast. When we actively spread things that may or may not be true about the people that are around us, we cause a level of hurt that's so deep that they have to get away from us. Churches have been split because of rumors and gossip. People have left the faith entirely because of the hurt that comes from rumor and gossip, because of what people have been saying about them behind their back. There is so much power in the words that you and I say. James actually said in James 3, verse 6, he said, the tongue is a fire. The tongue, a world of unrighteousness, is placed among our members. It stains the whole body. It sets the course of life on fire, and is itself set on fire by hell. You don't think James felt pretty strongly about rumors and gossip and the things that we choose to say? We have to be so very careful about the things that we choose to say, the ways that we talk about those around us, the ways that we mention our brothers and our sisters in conversation. In fact, Solomon points out that rumors and gossip are among the things that God hates the most in Proverbs chapter 6, verses 16 through 19. He says, the Lord hates 6 things. In fact, 7 are detestable to him: arrogant eyes, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that plots wicked schemes, feet eager to run to evil, a lying witness who gives false testimony, and one who stirs up trouble among the brothers. And what do rumors and gossip do, if not stir up trouble among each other? If God cannot stand it, if God detests it, then why in the world would we participate in it? If the notion that God hates rumors and lies and gossip is not enough to stop us from doing it, then frankly, I don't know what else could possibly do so. If our whole goal as Christians is to become more shaped in the image of Jesus Christ, to become more the people that God intended us to be, then it's pretty blunt. Rumors and gossip should have no spot amongst us. In fact, we should be the ones who are willing to stop it, to put it down immediately, to stamp it out, to put that fire out before it spreads and wreaks havoc and devastation amongst us. We need to shut it down because it can destroy the unity that we are meant to share. Rumors, gossip, and falsehood should have no place at all in the church that seeks to honor God and live in unity with each other. We need to shut it down. We need to get rid of it. We need to get out of it. Because, well, I heard, God hates it. We'd be wise to keep in mind another thing that James wrote in James chapter 1, verse 26, and we're going to close with it today. If anyone thinks that he is religious without controlling his tongue, his religion is useless, and he deceives himself.
bensound.com